Hi and welcome back to the Nordic Watch channel. I'm Anders from Finland, and in this video I'm reviewing the Seiko SPB143, a very popular watch instantly at the time of its introduction in the year 2020. And I think this Seiko diver is still one of the more popular models on the market today, even towards the end of 2024. And after owning it for a year or so, I understand why. The origin of the design of this model dates back to the Seiko 62 Mass, all the way back in 1965. The 62 Mass is a vintage Seiko model that fetches quite hefty prices nowadays, being a collector's item, often costing around a couple of grand. The SPB143 is clearly a homage to this legendary diver, and while quite a few Seiko models have drawn heavy influence from the 62 Mass, the SPB143 is possibly the most faithful homage yet, especially if not accounting for expensive limited editions such as the SJE093, which costs a whopping $3,500. Seiko have also recently introduced what I believe to be the replacement to this SPB143 lineup with the SPB453, 451 and 455 models, with a more discreet date window and an upgraded 6R55 movement. Hopefully I'll get to review one of those as soon as possible, and I'll try to keep that model also in mind when thinking about the value for money in this model. Now, don't get me wrong, the SPB143 is by no means an entry-level watch in itself either, and the MSRP is around $1,200, making it actually quite an expensive watch. I checked out Amazon and the prices are still at that range also, years after its release. I recommend looking for a slightly used one from forums or Facebook groups or eBay or something. If you find a used one in good condition, you can get really awesome value for money. The cheapest ones on Chrono24 I found were around $750 during the time of recording, which is already a great deal. The SPB143 is a part of the Prospex C lineup and is available in a couple of different color options in addition to this grey dialed version. The SPB145 is a dark brown dialed version, and then there is a gilt version on a rubber strap, the SPB147. There's also a more tactical looking SPB253 with a black case and dial, with some cool orange details on the bezel insert, as well as a Save the Ocean limited edition with a textured ocean blue dial, the SPB297. The SPB143 was a very welcomed watch model due to its very good looks combined with very wearable dimensions. I remember when it was released 4 years ago, I immediately knew I'm going to have to get one at some point. I already had a few divers in the collection, but several of them were a bit too large for my liking, and this one just seemed to hit the sweet spot. With a diameter of 40.5 mm and a lug-to-lug of only 47.5 mm, this is quite a compact diver, compared to many Seiko divers. The thickness is 13.4 mm or so, with the extra height from the sapphire, and the lug width is 20 mm. It always amazes me how big of a difference just a few millimeters make with regards to wearability. I have owned quite a few Seiko divers so far, like the SKX, Mini Turtle, Sumo and the Sea Urchin, and this is by far my favorite of the bunch. The wearable size is further improved by the nicely shaped case with downward curving lugs. I usually dislike if a bracelet has so-called male end links like on this one, which protrude outward before letting the bracelet fall down, effectively increasing the lug-to-lug distance a bit. In this case, however, the somewhat modest lug-to-lug and downward curvature of the case makes it work just fine, and I would say that this almost looks and feels like a 39mm diver. Here you can see a comparison with my Certina 38mm DS Action diver, as well as a comparison with the Seiko SKX 009, which wears substantially larger, as you can see. The sides of the case are brushed with some nice polished bevels on both sides, which definitely elevates the case finishing and gives a premium quality look. The lugs have drilled plug holes to help with strap changes, which will come in handy since this watch goes very well with so many different straps, as I will show you later in the video. I have some really nice straps from CNS watch bands, which I will use throughout the video. I've included a link to their website in the description below, and I can warmly recommend them. The 3 o'clock crown is a screw-down crown without any crown guards, staying true to the vintage design. There's no Seiko branding on the crown, which is a bit surprising given the price, but if I'm not mistaken, Seiko doesn't do it for their Prospex line in general. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Anyways, I don't find that to be such a big deal, and the crown does work fine for what it's meant to do. Due to not having any crown guards, the crown is super easy to grip and use. The nice knurling on it gives it good friction. On the back side, the screw-down case back helps to secure the 200 meters of water resistance for this ISO certified diver. And on the case back you can see the classic wave often seen on Seiko case backs, but in a smaller format than on the SKX, for example. On the top side we have a nice 120 click unidirectional dive time bezel with an easily grippable coinage side. The steel bezel insert has brushed finishing, which I really like, and it's quite honestly one of the favorite things about this watch for me. It's quite a matte finish with visible brushing, and the white details are engraved, adding a nice touch of refinement to the watch. The domed, or perhaps boxed, I'm not sure, sapphire crystal has anti-reflective coating on the inside. I've mentioned this before in previous videos, but in my opinion that's the only place to put it, because AR coating is more easily scratchable than a sapphire crystal, so you shouldn't apply it to the outside of the crystal because it will end up looking like a scratched crystal. The vintage shape of the crystal is a nice touch in my opinion. It's a bit risky though, since the crystal is exposed and more vulnerable to damage. Luckily it's only about 1 millimeter or so above the bezel insert, so it's not that vulnerable for impacts. Overall, I think there are some great details going on around this section of the watch. The surface of the bezel insert, then the raised edge of the sapphire, and also what looks like a steel chapter ring on the inside. I think the combination of these give a real nice touch of refinement and attention to detail. Both the case and bracelet have Seiko's hard DiaShield coating, which does a nice job at protecting the surfaces from minor scratches. I've used this watch quite a lot and there are not many scratches to be seen still, so the stuff seems to be working pretty well. The bracelet on the SPB143 is a pretty classical stainless steel bracelet with solid links and, unfortunately, the pin and collar system. For instructions on how to adjust the pin and collar bracelet, I'll link my tutorial up in the corner as well as in the description. The links are brushed with polished sides, and the bracelet tapers down to 18 mm by the push button deployment clasp. The Seiko branded milled clasp even has a stamped diver's extension on the opposite side from where they usually are located. I eventually found out how to open it. It took me a good while to figure it out. There are 4 holes for the micro adjustments on the clasp, which guarantees a good fit on the wrist. The finishing is also nice with brushing and a polished bevel to match the finishing on the case. In my opinion, the bracelet is a considerable step up in quality from the entry-level Seiko bracelets, about in the same category as on the Seiko Sumo. Overall, even though the bracelet feels like nice quality and looks good, I feel like Seiko could have done a much better job at matching it with the lugs of the case. I've seen this very often with Seikos. The integration of the bracelet and lugs just looks off. A prime example of this is the Seiko Sumo, where it's just awful. On the SPB143 it's not nearly as bad as on the Sumo, but it's still an eyesore in my opinion, and Seiko could have done a better job with integrating the bracelet with the lugs. As usual with Seiko divers, the spring bars are thicker than normal ones, which you should take into account when thinking about changing straps. Now moving on to the dial. It has a simple but beautiful design with a really good looking grey sunburst finishing. This grey variation is my favorite out of the color options, and also one of the key factors why I still prefer this to the looks of the newer black dialed SPB143. Grey is such an underappreciated dial color, and I'm happy Seiko chose it for this model. The applied indices are rectangular with plenty of lume. The 12, 3, 6 and 9 look like they are completely rectangular, while the rest are ever so slightly tapered, I think. The hands are baton style with some nice finishing dividing them in 2 differently finished sections, one side polished, one side brushed. And the finishing on the hands makes them stick out nicely when they are hit by the light. The stick style second hand has a rectangular lume pip towards the end of it. The branding on the dial is printed in a subtle silver, matching the minute track running around the outer periphery of the dial. The simple 3 o'clock date window is a no-nonsense solution with a bit of a weird stub of an index beside it. Apparently there are 2 different types of SPB143s out there. The original release didn't have this slight lume pip at the 3 o'clock, and apparently they re-released these models with this modification in order to meet the ISO diver certifications. Or at least that's how I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. I guess another good option would be to have a more invisible date window at the 4:30 o'clock, which they now did with the newest SPB453 model. Having the window at the 3 o'clock position, it makes more sense not to have the date wheel color matching the dial, and with this lighter color it matches the indices more, which makes sense. As usual, Seiko's Lume Bright does a great job at lighting up the markers and hands in the dark, no surprise there. Me and many others have gotten so used to Seiko's great lume that Seiko doesn't get enough credit for it, in my opinion. The more you review other watches than Seiko's, the more you are reminded that great lume is not a given. All in all, the watch lights up like a torch, more or less. Now let's discuss the movement. The SPB143 uses Seiko's 6R35 caliber in-house movement. It's the successor to the 6R15 found in my SARB 033, for example. It has an improved power reserve of 70 hours, and the accuracy is rated at -15 to +25 seconds per day. The one I have here is performing at -5 seconds per day right now, which is decent. The 6R35 beats at 21,600 beats per hour. It features hacking and hand winding, and the rotor winds in both ways, which is always something I prefer. It makes it both efficient as well as more quiet on the wrist. The compact size as well as the easily matchable black and grey colors make this watch an absolute dream when it comes to pairing it with different straps, when you want to switch away from the comfortable metal bracelet. I think you can't go wrong with a tropical rubber strap to match the vintage 62 mass vibes. The case shape really complements a rubber strap like this in my opinion. Another great option is a nylon strap. This color variation will work with most colors. Here are some options for you to look at. All these straps are from CNS Watch Bands. As I mentioned, there's a link in the description to their website. I don't get any commissions for it, but they have a huge selection of straps for affordable prices, and I've been using them for as long as I've been into watches, and I can warmly recommend them. I think the way that this watch works with straps really strengthens the argument that you could have the Seiko SPB143 as a one-watch collection. Maybe the only stretch in that is when you need to wear it with a suit, but hey, ever since James Bond has worn divers with suits, so can you. Well, that's it for this review. I think we covered pretty much all there is to the Seiko SPB143, and hopefully you got a good picture of the specs, wearability and versatility of it. The bottom line is that the specs are solid, the looks are fantastic, and the finishing is up to par for the price in my opinion. The only questions are, firstly, are you going to spend about $1,000 on a diver? And if you are, should you opt for the newer SPB453 or this one? Now that comes down to preference, but I really love the grey dial of the SPB143, so my vote goes for a second-hand SPB143 for a lower price. That would be where the best value is. I hope you found this video useful. Please like and subscribe if you did, and also check me out on Instagram at Nordic Watch Channel, and stay tuned for more videos. Bye bye.